A zoom zip and I wake up. A zoom zip. A zoom zip and I wake up. A zoom zip.
Mahalo, everybody, for coming out tonight. I know that it's our common bond of Aloha Aina that brings us together, and that's so powerful. Way more powerful than D-Canberra or 5-4-B or whatever next happens. It's our Aloha that's going to change the situation in the world. My name's Eden, and I'm just really privileged just to welcome you tonight and let you know that this new flowering of our movement, GMO-free Hawaii, we're calling it, is a coalition, a grassroots coalition of people who are new to this concern or maybe have been working about it for many years. But it's interesting how that many forces are coming together to help us make the change that we want to see in our world. Our precious Hawaii can lead the world. And I think maybe many of you have the same feeling that Hawaii has the key to inspire the rest of the world to make the changes that we need to feed each other. You've probably heard of the concept of food sovereignty, which is sort of a political philosophy, but it's actually a living movement that was brought to the world stage by a great group that is worth checking out if you haven't, called the Via Campesina, the Way of the Farmer, which is the International Peasant and Farm Workers Union around the world. They're big across every continent, including young people in Europe who are occupying lands and growing food. So if you think it's not to mention all the powerful work being done by South American Indians, those that love the Corn Mother, and our Kalo warriors here in Hawaii. As I said, we're a coalition of residents here on the Big Island, and we're just trying to widen and open up the conversation because questions are very powerful. Questions bring us all to the edge of the common ground that we're trying to move forward to. I just wanted to say, perhaps many of you saw last weekend or so, there was a couple of newspaper articles, headlines promoting the victory of GMO, etc. And our Dr. Gonzalez was featured there. I haven't seen a film, but a friend that I was with who glanced at the headline, and that's the only reason she recognized Dr. Gonzalez. She said, well, he was crying about not knowing what's happening in 20 years. And the film I'm talking about is called Seeds of Change. And if you've seen it, I guess Dr. Gonzalez, who is the father of the GMO papaya, certainly a well-meaning local boy who went to Cornell and did develop the GMO papaya. Anyway, he was asked in this film, do you know what's going to happen? What will happen in 20 years? And at that point, his eyes teared up and he said, no, I don't know what's going to happen in 20 years. So my feeling is we can't leave him alone. We can't leave the papaya farmers alone. Those that are still trying to make a living growing papaya, we need to give them a viable way of making a good living, again, with wholesome food that feeds the people here and definitely feeds wholesome food to our brothers and sisters in Japan or elsewhere. So those are just some of the topics I wanted to touch on. One more cheery thought, since I'll tell you, I've been working on this issue since about 1999. I was a librarian at Na'alehu school librarian, and I saw a teacher training offered. It was called Fields of Genes, and I noticed it was co-sponsored by the USDA and Monsanto. And I'd heard a little bit about, it was about promoting genetic engineering to children. So I knew a little bit about it. I studied up about it, and I attended that teacher training. I kind of crashed it with questions. Sometimes questions aren't so uncomfortable, but I do remember the researcher, her first name's Chieko, who was researching at that time GMO coffee, and I asked her some of those same questions. How do you know that it won't cross-pollinate, or how do you know that it won't alter coffee in ways that you don't know? And she said, you're right. I remember her backing up, you're right, we don't know enough. made people uncomfortable, but these are the kind of questions we have to allow to our brothers and sisters. And after that, part of my research back there in 99 to 2000, I looked up and found that Hawaii was, probably nearly is still, the world center of unregulated GMO field testing. At that time, there was over 2,500 field tests of pharmaceutical crops and all kinds of crops, all considered CBI, confidential business information. So I was pretty overwhelmed and struck to realize that this is our precious Hawaii. So the activist that I'm inspired by are Jim Albertini. I called him up, the man that jumped in front of a nuclear submarine in front of Hilo Harbor, kept us safe that way. I asked him, Jim, God, what can I do? This is kind of overwhelming. He said, well, why don't you call DBED and see what they're doing? So I did that, and this, again, questions are so powerful. Called up DBED and said, hi, I just took this teacher training and about GMOs, and I'm wondering what else the state might be doing to promote GMOs, just to find out. They referred me to a document at that time that was called the Blueprint for Biotechnology, that was sort of a master plan to give huge tax breaks. That this was in the 90s, and it's all played out very well for to the hands of Monsanto, Syngenta, Dow, and Pioneer, and all of them. But at that time, that was their focus: big tax breaks, and Hawaii's open for business, as Governor Lingle said about Maui in general. Biotech was invited to Hawaii big time. And I said, well, if you're interested, you can attend this little briefing we're having at the new Visitors Center, Convention Center in Honolulu, because the biotech industry is planning their convention here to be in 2006. And so I kind of went incognito. I mean, not really, I used my real name, but somehow they got my name wrong. And I went in there, and there was the governor's panel, business representatives being briefed. And it was a very disturbing briefing, let me tell you. I think it was disturbing even for the people sitting there. They talked about the crops that they were rolling out. And they showed, at one point, they showed that phosphorescent mouse, that cloned mouse, that was sort of a highlight of their work. And there was a stunned silence in the building, and it was eerie. And a lot of me wanted to get up and stand up and go, you people, this is wrong, but I just took notes. I just stayed there and listened, because I got these other two quotes that really lit my fire and hasn't gone out yet. And I listened to the biotech spokesman, and he said these two things. He said, we can exploit Hawaii's biodiversity for biotechnology. All about that. And then he said, this one, he said, Hawaii's a good place to do business because the people here are passive. Okay? Something clicked in me and in my know-how, and I know that that's what happened. They guessed wrong. They counted wrong because they underestimated who the Hawaiian people are, what the Hawaiian land is, what Hawaii is. We've got layers of oppression and occupation here, as most of us all realize. We've got illegally occupied country. Many economic wrongs have been done here. This latest, this occupation by biotech in Hawaii is completely beyond the pale, and it's beyond what the world expects for Hawaii to be representing. So I was also really gratified to see that so much wider and wider waves of resistance and empowerment, and as our GMO-free Hawaii Island website says, we're offering alternatives and healthier opportunities for farming in a sustainable, regenerative manner. We can share those for the world. Primarily seed production, right? Identity preserved seed production. How can we do that? We have to make our island GMO free, so we can reserve that right for us. So anyway, if you see this pamphlet, I was super gratified to see that those quotes that always made me lose sleep thinking about we can exploit Hawaii's biodiversity for biotechnology, and Hawaii is a good place to do business because the people here are passive. Well, Kea put this brochure together, and she quoted those quotes here, and I hope it lights our fires to a lot of us, because we've got a lot of great knowledge. We're not alone. As bad as the problem may seem, there's two small things I want to mention. There's a Hawaiian concept of the Hilo, which is like the aura made up of our thoughts around the earth. So as we determine the world we want, sharing food fairly with our brothers and sisters, supporting farmers, that's creating a force. as well as people on the ground activating all over the world. I've come to know some wonderful people from places like Iraq. A woman has started a thing called International Seed Day that draws attention to something that I'd like y'all to be aware of. Sort of like a, what do you call it, turbo capitalism. It's Order 81 when Iraq was first occupied. There in Iraq, maybe the cradle of civilization, where wheat and lots of foods were domesticated, they were disallowed. They were point blank disallowed, illegal to save seeds in Iraq. It was one of the first acts of occupation there. And so that's just it could be like a harbinger of things that would come here, but no, we're changing it here. Tonight we have lots of inspiration. We have our Dr. Hector Valenzuela, who's an expert in what can be done and what is being done, and everyone else's beautiful energy in Manoa. I welcome you here tonight and to expand and join our conversation with your neighbors, and let's change it here on Hawaii Island.
Aloha everyone, I'm Kea Kapahua, and I just have a couple of announcements before we move on with our speakers. And our first announcement is I'm going to actually send this petition around, and if you feel like you'd like to put your name to this, then please go ahead and do so, and we'll have somebody enter this in the computer tomorrow. But Jason Blair, sitting right there in the blue shirt, would you raise your hand? He started this petition just a few days ago, and it's to encourage the County Council to vote yes or to support Bill 79. And so yesterday, I think the petition was at 130, 150 signatures, and as of the count tonight, we're at 1,200. Yeah. So, and I know not everyone does Facebook, and not everyone's on the computer, so if we need to do it paper style, let's do it paper style. So there's lots of blanks here. You can, as I'm chattering about the announcements, you can kind of read through it and go ahead and sign, and someone else will enter that into the computer. But thank you. Next announcement is the Olelo Signature Productions will be hosting GMOs Week of 1-hour shows on genetically modified organisms, and that actually starts tonight from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. So June 24th through Thursday, June 27th. And so it's available on Channel 55 on Oahu and Channel 54 on all of the neighbor islands. And I'm sure I'm talking too fast and you won't get to write it down, so I wrote it down on the board for you. So later you can always just come up and write that down if you want the information. And there's also their website listed if you want to go to that for more information. But it should be a pretty interesting conversation. Tonight and tomorrow night are pre-recorded shows, and so they'll have the pro-GMO side of it and the non-GMO side. And so you'll kind of get to hear that debate if you tune into to that. And some of the speakers that are listed for the pro-GMO panel are Dennis Gonzalez, who, the papaya, GMO papaya, rainbow papaya inventor, and Dean Okimoto, who is the president of the Hawaii Farm Bureau, Adolf Helm, who is a project manager for Dow AgriSciences on Molokai. The non-GMO panel includes Uncle Walter Riddy, who's a longtime activist from Molokai, Gary Hooser, Kauai County Council member and chair of the Agriculture and Intergovernmental Affairs Committee, and Scott Cooney, professor of sustainability at the Schindler College of Business at UH Manoa. And on Wednesday and Thursday, they'll actually have live debate and discussion, which Hector Valenzuela will be part of as well, and maybe he could share a little bit about that with us tonight as well. So anyways, speaking of Hector, we'd like to welcome Dr. Hector Valenzuela, professor and crop extension specialist at UH Manoa College of Tropical Agriculture. He has been on the front lines of promoting sustainable farming methods. His resume is longer than Santa's delivery list, and he's done extensive research on pesticides and herbicides, especially as they relate to GMO crops. So if you'd like to, I'll give him a hand and welcome him up.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to speak here tonight. Can everybody hear okay? Okay. First, clarification that I'm not a spokesperson for any groups. I'm speaking as an individual, and when groups invite me to talk, I am happy to do so. I talk about crop biotechnology based on my background in crop science for the past 25 years or so, and also from following the field of crop biotechnology and the concerns that I got about crop biotechnology when I started to look at it, especially over the past 15 years or so. Also to clarify that it is wrong to say that scientists are not supposed to ask questions. If there are no questions, there is no science. And furthermore, scientists, just like journalists, have the duty to ask questions and to furthermore share this information with the public. And if they don't do it, if we as scientists don't ask questions, who will ask those questions? I became concerned about crop biotechnology during the mid-90s. I was working as an extension specialist at UH. I've been at UH for about 6, 7, 8 years. And suddenly, in all our papers, the word came out that the future of agriculture in Hawaii was crop biotechnology. And this was a unique stage in the history of Hawaii because all the plantations were closing down. So there was all kinds of land available for farming. So the extension agents that I work with, clients, everybody was asking, what are we going to do with all this land? What is going to happen with Hawaii? What are we doing? What are we planning on doing? So it was a really exciting time for us to look into the future and say, we've been doing this for the past 100 years. What are we going to do into the future? And about this time is when the buzzword biotechnology started to come with us. Suddenly our administrators started to talk about it, our politicians, Governor Cayetano, and suddenly the word became that biotechnology was the future of agriculture in Hawaii. And I was doing my own work with vegetables, I was doing research on organic farming, my own little trials around the state, and I was intensively doing that and happy, but in the background was this buzzword about biotechnology. And suddenly the resources from the university, from our college, started to, the resources started, I gotta turn my phone away, I don't know what happened. Suddenly the resources from the university started to shift away from traditional agriculture towards the so-called biotechnology. And about this time, we started hearing that there was a new crop coming up that was a GMO papaya. So because there was so much noise about it, I had followed biotech before, but hadn't really looked into it. I started to ask more questions about it. What's all this word about GMO papaya? What's all about these GMO companies in the state? What's going on? And I started asking more in-depth questions about, because they were open field tests, so I started to ask questions. What are some of the potential impacts of this technology? What are the environmental impacts? Is this pollen going to go somewhere else? Are we going to be consuming this, and what are the health impacts? And I realized that I wasn't obtaining the answers that I was looking for. And this happened as well with papaya. My next door neighbors were the papaya researchers, and I say, can you show me some of the safety studies that you have conducted, environmental studies, health studies? And I pretty much came empty-handed. I continued this discussion with my colleagues for several years, having internal discussion about the benefits and pros and cons of GMOs. And when I failed to find those answers, I started to hear the same concerns from the community, from organic farmers in Big Island and so on. And it got to the point where I started to, just like today, to start to get invited to talk about these issues. And I got invited to testify as county council in Maui in 2003. And I did come up and talk for about 7 minutes and said, I do have several concerns about this technology. And if we fast forward from 03 to today, about 10 years later, I can only say that my concerns about the technology, crop biotechnology, have only increased. We've experienced this technology for the past 20 to 30 years so far, and the number of questions that I had from 10 years ago have only increased. There's a lot more questions that I have about the environment, health impacts, and we do have a lot more research that is not conclusive. It's not saying we're causing X amount of harm, but these studies do raise several red flags, what I call red flags. And a red flag is a study that says, hey man, there's a level of concern here that we should conduct further studies or do something about it, or trigger the precautionary principle. And the precautionary principle is an international agreement that says we don't have to have the ultimate answer, but if there's enough concern about potential risks, we should stop this technology, study it, and don't continue until we have a better understanding about what's really going on in the community. So in essence, I think that we are talking about the future of agriculture in the state. And when we're dealing with genetically modified crops, the problem becomes that if we do decide to adopt GM crops in the state, this is something that we cannot take back. We're dealing with a biological organism, and it is pretty much like taking the genie out of the bottle. We release it into the environment, and it may be impossible to take this gene back, these genes back, and say we don't want to deal with them anymore because we realized 10 years later that they were harming the population or some organism or harming us in some way or another. And my point has been that when we look at GMOs, which is kind of a new technology, we can look at what have we been doing in the past and what can we learn about it. So we can look at the era of plantation agriculture. Plantation agriculture had many positive sides for Hawaii. We had a big export industry, we had a lot of production. But today, we can go back and realize that we indeed ended up polluting the environment with high levels of toxics, and that today we're paying for that level of pollution. I live in Central Oahu, and we have to filter the drinking water in Central Oahu because chemicals that were used by plantation agriculture. So we know that some of those chemicals, we know today that they can cause considerable harm to human health and the population. The costs of dealing with those problems were paid by the taxpayer. The profits were made by the corporations that when they were not happy with what's going on in Hawaii, like Del Monte, they picked up and overnight they were gone. So our concern is when we have a new generation of plantations coming to the state, we can ask those same level of questions. Are the products that they're producing, are they harmful in any way? And if something goes wrong, who is going to deal with it? Are we going to deal with it in terms of human disease and inflict, or with taxes to deal with those issues? And I was just talking with a grower in North Shore, Oahu, today, in fact. He's been an organic farmer for many years. He was farming in Manoa at first as a small farmer, first as a chemical farmer, and then decided to shift into organics about 15 to 20 years ago. He just realized a few months ago that the water in his well was contaminated by a chemical from the plantation days. It's, I don't know if I can pronounce it, it's a TCP-123 trichloropropene, I believe. It is kind of a nasty chemical. He didn't know it was there. The organic certifiers didn't know it was there. So he approached the organic certifier and say, am I certified? What this is in my water? And so this is an issue that he's dealing with now. And he's trying, how can I filter this chemical out of it? Because he's close to some of the seed companies, he recently also got exposed to some drift from pesticide applications. And also recently, it seems like everything is falling on him these last few weeks. Recently, he also sampled some of the papayas in his farm, and found that they were contaminated, that they were genetically modified papayas. And he never intended to have these papayas in his field. So this level of contamination is what is called trespassing. And in farming, it's a traditional practice between farmers that you keep your farm within your farm. You don't have your cows go and feed on the neighbor's farm. You don't spray on the neighbor's farm. It's a long tradition in farming that you respect what's going on around your community. We're dealing with a new level of farming, genetic engineering, where they seem to be unable to contain their farming operations. The pesticides that they're applying are a continuation of the plantation days. They are going to the aquifers, to the aquatic habitats, and they seem to be unable to contain the genetic material as well. UH recently conducted a study and found high levels of contamination, even on the streets in Oahu, even on wild areas of papaya. And we recently had a debate with the researcher from Manoa, and he said 20% contamination. That's not such a big deal. My perspective is one papaya that is contaminated is a high level, is too much. And you should be able, if you're a responsible farmer, you should be able to contain your facility without polluting or contaminating your neighbor's farm. So when we are talking about genetically modified crops, especially with the seed industry, we also have to understand that pesticides are an integral part of the production system. So almost 100% of the acreage planted today to genetically modified crops require the use of pesticides for their production. You have RoundUp ready herbicide-resistant crops that, of course, you need the herbicide to kill everything except the crop itself. And with the production of BT crops, the pesticide is actually incorporated within the plant itself. And today we are still learning about how little we know about the effect of pesticides on human health. We don't understand about many of the pesticides. For example, this TCP chemical that was used by the plantation industry, we still don't understand a lot about it. There are no federal standards about how much of that chemical are allowed in our water. Fortunately, we do have some standards in Hawaii. And not only we don't understand some of these chemicals, we don't understand how do they behave once we start mixing them together. So if we have a combination of 10, 20, 30 chemicals used on the farm, what level of combinations are we observing on the soil, on the air, and how do those combinations of chemicals are affecting our health? So when looking at agriculture overall, I think or talk about what model of agriculture are we talking about or we want to adopt for our communities. And because we are in a democratic society, this is something where the public should be able to have a say. What kind of model are we as taxpayers want to subsidize and support and promote around our neighborhoods? A publication just came out this week from Australia that compared agricultural systems in the Midwest, which are GMO based, compared to those in Europe in a geographic similar area, and they found that the sustainability of the production systems were a lot better in Europe, where they use less pesticides and less no GM crops. So we have to continue to look at the impacts of these models to decide as a community what do we want to adopt and what do we want to promote in our communities. So when we talk about a model and about our decision making in our communities, we have to decide if we want to adopt an agricultural model that is based on short-term profits and using the land, extracting resources from the land, or do we want to adopt more sustainable systems where we actually work with the land and return what we take back to the land. And when we talk about models, we talk about also what is called the structure of agriculture. And several panels have come together over the past 20 to 30 years. And a panel of scientists, national panel of scientists. And these panels have come to the conclusion that the university system, the land-grant university system, has actually reinforced and strengthens the current structure of agriculture, which has led to the consolidation of agriculture and towards the consolidation of the industry towards fewer and fewer larger corporations. So these panels were saying we are going in the wrong direction. We should be diversifying our agricultural systems, but the academic system, the university system, is actually reinforcing the systems. We are continuing to promote the use of chemicals and pesticides, and over the past 15 years, we have been one of the main cheerleaders of the genetically modified industry. And this takes back to my original question, where we should have professors allowed to ask questions about whether this is a good way to go or not. With regards to crop biotechnology, my main point has been that biotechnology is not a science, but it's just a technology that we are applying. But that we actually have little understanding about the science behind crop biotechnology. We have little understanding about the genetics behind what's going on with crop biotechnology. The model of biotech is based on the idea that one gene has one trait, and for instance, one gene has herbicide resistant and everything is magic. Now we can have great agriculture. But we don't understand enough about gene-to-gene interactions. And we know that one gene doesn't have only one function, but interacts with other genes in ways that we don't understand to create secondary, tertiary effects, and so on. And we don't understand all of these different ramifications. The concern when we don't have a good understanding is that down the road, just like with pesticides, we will end up with what are called unintended consequences. And when people ask me what's going on with GMOs, like I asked earlier today, I'm telling them almost every week nowadays, new information, new data is coming out about these so-called unintended consequences. And these are cases that something is happening where we didn't predict that would happen, or that the manufacturer says this is not going to happen. So I'm just going to give you a couple of examples about what I'm talking about, unintended consequences. I brought this earlier in Kona and also in Hilo, and the first case is the fact that a paper that just came out a few months ago from regulators in Europe saying that a lot of the traits that have been introduced today, a lot of the commercial GMO traits that have been introduced, have a hidden viral gene that the researchers didn't know was there, and that the regulators didn't know was there, and that few safety studies have been conducted to determine the safety of this hidden viral gene. Looking into it, I realized that the rainbow papaya, which was released by UH in 1998, also happened to have this hidden gene, viral gene. So we have the promoter. We introduce a cassette into the papaya, and this cassette contains genetic material from several different organisms, from bacteria, a couple of bacteria, from a couple of viruses, and we put all of these cassette together, hopefully to make the papaya do what we want it to do, which is to become resistant to a virus. So part of the cassette includes a vector, and the vector is a viral vector that switches the genes on and off, like a light switch. I want you to work, turn it on, and the virus becomes resistant to another virus. We realized that this vector had another gene attached to it that we didn't know was there. It just tagged along to go along with it. We know that this gene is physiologically active. We have known this gene before. We just didn't know that it was inserted into the GMO papaya. So when the UH requested the regulation of the papaya, we didn't tell regulators that this hidden viral gene was there, or the segment of the gene was there. We didn't conduct any studies to evaluate does it have any health effects on animals or humans. And apparently, we didn't inform Japan when we exported this papaya, even though that by that time we had already conducted a sequence of the papaya. Another example, which just happened a couple of weeks ago, was the contamination of genetically modified wheat in Oregon State. Prior to this discovery, they had not planted GM wheat in Oregon for about 8 to 10 years. So how could a contamination occur about 8 years after the last planting? We don't know how it happened, and again, it's an unintended consequence. If it had been planted extensively, the level of contamination would be a lot greater than what it was. This was only the third case of contamination in Oregon over the past few years. It wasn't a single incident. Previously in Oregon, we had a contamination of bentgrass, another experimental GM variety, which was later on found to be in wild areas. The growers were trying to control it with herbicides, and they wouldn't be able to control it. About a year later, there was also a case of contamination from genetically modified beets. So some consumers went to the store, they bought growing media like compost to use in the garden, and they found genetically modified beets inside that growing media. Again, how did it happen? We don't know. But the case is that there's pure regulation going on, and the industry is unable to contain its materials. A study just came out about an epidemiological study on the effect of pesticides used by the genetically modified industry in Latin America. And there's more and more evidence coming out from Paraguay, from Argentina, in terms of birth defects, malformations in the body of babies, from exposure to pesticides used by the genetically modified industry. A long-term study was recently published based on pigs. The first long-term study, they actually fed the pigs actual GM feed that you buy at the feed store, compared to controls that didn't have those feed, and they found considerable inflammation of the stomach, and also abnormal growth of the uterus. With regards to the herbicide RoundUp, a study also came out very recently showing that RoundUp promotes the growth of breast cancer cells. This was only a follow-up to earlier studies showing similar kinds of adverse effects on cell growth and on the hormone growth on cells, which could lead to tumor growth or formation. Similar, just recently, a study came out showing that the Bt toxin was toxic to the blood of mice in experimental studies, and this same toxin was found in a survey conducted in Canada about a year or so ago, which showed this toxin in the blood of non-pregnant women, in the blood of pregnant women, and also in the fetus. And a lot of, again, question marks about potential side effects. This same study also found residues of RoundUp and another herbicide on the blood of non-pregnant women. A lifelong study was conducted last year, and it was the first study that evaluated the effect of both GM varieties and the herbicide RoundUp, both treated together and separately, on the life of mice for the entire life of the mice. Most studies conducted by industry are only about 90 days long, and this, compared to human life, is until you are about 9, 10 years old. So this was the first long life study throughout the duration of the life of the mice that evaluated what if we feed these materials to the mice throughout their entire lives. And this study found considerable adverse effects on several organs. This was a pretty comprehensive study. It cost about $5 to $6 million by a pretty large research team. So looking at it, it was a pretty comprehensive study that we would hope that was conducted more often on other GM varieties. The Roundup caused mammary tumors in females, 4 times as many tumors in males, which were observed 600 days earlier than in the controls. We observed early death, sexual hormonal imbalance, and pituitary gland, liver, and severe kidney dysfunction. And all of these when compared to the controls, or that is to the animals that were not fed genetically modified materials or the herbicide Roundup. And another interesting study that has been coming over the past couple of years is the fact of the effect of the herbicide Roundup on the microbial activity in the soil. So it seems that Roundup, just like phosphorus, fixes itself to the soil, but that when it gets released from the soil, it interacts with microbial activity. It damages the activity of microbes that helps to the uptake of micronutrients to the plant and promotes the activity of bad organisms in the soil. When plants don't have enough micronutrients, they become susceptible to disease. They die because of the disease, and that's the actual mechanism of action of Roundup herbicide. It makes the plants very weak because no macronutrients, and the plants die. The problem is that you harvest your wheat or your corn, you plant tomatoes 6 months or a year down the road. If that Roundup gets released from the soil 6 months or a year down the road, it could reach your tomatoes, cause micronutrient deficiency in tomatoes, and cause a disease outbreak in tomatoes. And what do our farmers do when there's a deficiency? They have to come in and spray a lot of fungicide, a lot of chemicals. So we could be creating a chain of effects, resulting on more and more chemical applications in our fields. And because we've been using Roundup so much for the past 20 to 30 years, it could be that this has been an ongoing occurrence in Hawaii for the past 15 years or so. So again, we're dealing with unintended consequences. We're talking about the herbicide Roundup, which over the years we have talked about it as being beneficial, having nothing wrong with it, it's benign to the environment. And now we're starting to find unintended consequences, which is if we go over pesticides that we have used in the past, it has happened on and on and on. So a new research paper just came out. So we're talking about Roundup and microbial interactions in the soil. And scientists will tell us we don't have to worry about Roundup because humans don't have the same enzyme. We don't have the shikimic pathway in humans. However, a new paper just came out and is telling us in the body we have 10 times as much bacteria as we have human cells. And our gut is filled with bacteria. And our human health, the basis of our health, is almost dependent on the health of this microbial activity on our body. So this study just came out. It's coming from a professor at MIT. She's a biophysicist. So she looks at biology and physics, and she looks at complex problems coming from many different angles, angles that we have not yet looked to date. So she's starting to make connections of Roundup affecting the microbial activity in the gut, and that having a connection to a series of health problems that we have observed over the past 10 to 15 years. And if you look at the graphs on the paper, you see the use of Roundup over the past 15 years and the incidence of these human diseases that have exploded over the past 10 to 15 years. She's talking about diabetes, autism, a series of abnormal diseases and outbreaks that have occurred over the past 15 years. I don't think that Roundup is the single cause, but just like with the colony collapse disorder with bees, we're starting to realize that the bees are getting hit from many different angles, and that the pesticides that we're using with bees are just one of the angles that are weakening the bees, leading to their collapse. So it could be that RoundUp is affecting the microbial activity in our bodies, and again, she makes these connections in her paper. She does it very well documented, to several disorders in the human body. I just want to conclude by indicating that the international consensus of large organizations coming together, like the Food and Agriculture Organization, the World Bank, group of studies and international reviews, that the way to deal with the effects of climate change, with the increases in food prices, with the increase of energy prices, that the way to develop resilient systems is to develop small-scale agroecological systems based on ecological or organic farming approaches. So far in Hawaii and in the United States, by that way, small farms have not even been included, are not even in the radar of policymakers. So from a community perspective, the main message is that small farms are real farms. And not only are they real farms, but they are actually more productive. They contribute more to the economy of small rural communities, and they end up developing more resilient systems that are much better able to deal with the ongoing effects of climate change. This deals with droughts, with floodings, with ongoing floodings, and we have seen this on and on over the past 10 to 15 years. Largely simplified or monoculture systems, when they get exposed to a big drought or a flood, they get wiped out. Small-scale diversified systems are able to bounce back a lot faster and to continue to do it. So basically what we need is small-scale farming, green corridors of mosaics around our communities, where the food doesn't have to be shipped over long distances, which is pretty expensive. And these results in high biodiversity, high resilient systems that will allow us to better become self-sufficient in the state in terms of food production and the like.
Hello, Hector. We'd like to welcome Council Member Margaret Wille, who represents District 9, North and South Kohala. Margaret has introduced Bill 79 to the County Council that would prohibit any further introduction of GMO crops on Hawaii Island. Margaret Wille serves on the Hawaii County Council as chair of the Committee on Agriculture, Water, and Energy Sustainability, vice chair of the Planning Committee, and vice chair of the Public Safety and Mass Transit Committee. We will open up for a question and answer period immediately following Margaret Wille's explanation of the bill. So go ahead and give her a good welcome.
Leave it down. Thank you for having me here and listening to me, and we're all in this together. So as we hear, I'm not going to go through all the science. I think that many of you probably know more of the science than I do. And let me say, when I started looking at this issue, it wasn't something that I've been passionate about or I was concerned, but basically I've been trying to bring in legislation and looking at things in terms of what we as an island community should have some say-so about. So whether it's a controversial issue or different things that no matter what it is, if it impacts us, that I try to bring that forward to the council so that we can, as a island community, discuss those issues and have some informed decision making where we really have an impact on what happens on this island. And I think that we really have a choice. I mean, I think that was sort of one of the points that they made. And I looked at this picture over here, and you can see, if you come down here, sort of industrial agriculture versus local farming and natural farming. You know, we're really at a point where this decision is being made, and it's us right now that'll impact what that decision is. We're either going to go in one direction or the other, and it will probably impact us for generations. What happens with GMO is not the whole conversation. There's whether it's pesticides, labeling, knowledge, other issues, but it's really, this sets the direction of this island canoe, you know, what we eat. For me, I look around and you say, oh, look at all these things going wrong in the rest of the world, and what are we going to do, and this is bad, and I just go, you know, but whatever else is going on, if we work hard, we can make an impact right here. And I think, as Eden said, like, be a model and be an example of what we say. If we talk aloha aina, you know, what does that mean? You know, what does that mean? And in terms of the future generations, and the whole idea of sort of the public trust, and that we're accountable not just to ourselves and our short-term profits, but to ourselves in terms of the planet, and in terms of the island, and in terms of the web of life that we're only one part of. So I think that when we look at those choices, you know, do we go industrial ag or the local farming and natural farming and less toxins? Do we look at where local people and this island has a say-so, or do we return to more corporate style government? I mean, I just want to, I think it's important just looking at that this is really one step in a process. One thing that happened earlier this year was a piece of state legislation that I just sort of bumped into. You know, SB 727, oh, what is this? And I start looking at it, in paragraph 13 out of Article 17 has our home rule statute, and it crosses out life and health or well-being. And suddenly I go, that's what I quote when I go to court to say we have jurisdiction. So if you cross that out, doesn't that mean that on a local level we would no longer have any say over agriculture, over parks, over anything having to do with welfare, and we would only be left with protecting private property and securing order? And I'm like, so anyway, so I got on a plane and went over there and I go there and I say, well, I can't understand this. This is our home rule statute. And it had passed all 3 Senate committees with only 1 senator opposition. The hearing wasn't even being televised. There was nothing in the media. I was the only government person there, local or state, who was testifying. They did have, you know, testimony. And so I just say, is this a joke? Are you trying to eliminate county government and put an ocean between the people and the first layer of government? Well, it wasn't until the others testified that I realized, hi, I'm so-and-so from headquarters in Monsanto in Idaho, and local government is interfering with our corporate policies. You know, that's what it was. So I just went, are you kidding? You think you're going to do this? We're not going to tolerate this. You know, but it was like 5 people. I mean, I think you mentioned Alan, whatever his name, Moto, was the Farm Bureau. He's now Monsanto's head lobbyist. You know, I mean, it's... Yeah. And so they're testifying, and here it is, and you know, we really need to stop stop this interference, and we've eliminated county government that has anything to do with agriculture in 27 states. And I'm thinking, my goodness, we would not be here. We would not be able to do this as of if that bill had been signed. And here it is, all of the Senate committees that had gone through and just written it. It's just sort of hidden. The description said economic development. So I just want to say, look at, we're at a pivotal point, but we're really, here they are trying to eliminate so we can't have any say-so whatsoever. Now it'll be, okay, here we are trying to have some say-so here, let's stop us. But even if we pass this, it'll be a fight on the state level. You know, they only have a handful of people that they have to impact. You know, they hover, you know, it's just power, and it's very, you come up against it, you just go, you know, I just don't do fear. You know, we're just going to go ahead on this. But I it's not going to end, whichever way. If we don't pass this, is that over? No. It's all a part of educating, and this is one step, and making a decision. I also want to go back to what was said, like the precautionary principle. And this is the law of this state. And this is the law in this county. And what that says is, if there's uncertainty, you err on the side of conservation.
Amen.
Okay? That's the law. What is the analytical framework? The analytical framework is not, Margaret, can you show me who died from this? It's, you know, you look at, there's science, they may have tests, and this is okay, and there's tests on both sides. There's nations, but if it's uncertain, which do you do? And especially here, where you have a generational impact. You know, what is the testing? Why is it that there were exemptions given to this industry when it would be for human consumption? You know, who has that burden of proof? Is it on the public? Is it on the government? Or is it on those who seek to utilize this new process that has these risks? And how much do we learn from other countries and what their tests are? Or we just, you know, disregard what's gone in other places? I think one of the, and as we look around and see this is the first generation where our children, as a group, will be less healthy than their parents. And it doesn't mean this is, okay, it's GMOs. It means whatever, all that soup of reasons. But there's some that we can't do anything about. You know, I would like to pass a bill, anti-bog bill, but I haven't figured that one out. But there are things we can do something about. So we try to do what we can in that area, and that's what I see, whether it's food for ourselves, as we see more and more allergies, more and more diabetes, debilitating diseases, and yet, you know, I think when I was speaking to someone supporting Monsanto, well, look at all these good things they're doing, like medicine for diabetes, and I'm going, well, you know, you sort of help to cause the problem, and there you are, creating the science where you do it. And one of the arguments or concerns has been sort of the right to farm, and that, you know, this is my land, this is private property. If I want to do GMOs, I'm going to do GMOs, and this is part of sort of the American heritage. But yet here you have it where one person, if one person is doing something that can contaminate and destroy another's, which one do you give the priority for? Which one do you support? So again, this is, it's not simple though. There are issues. How do we take care of those who have invested in this and in good faith are doing things that were, you know, they were told this is good and this is everything's okay here, for that reason, you know, this bill is not perfect, and there's probably things that every one of you aren't going to like in it, but it's sort of taking one step of sort of, let's draw the line where it is. Let's at least come to stop further contamination and further going in that direction, while at the same time, like through the exemptions, and I'm working on those, how can we keep those so we're taking into account, weighing some of those private concerns against the ultimate public good that we all want. So again, I see this as a first step. It's not dealing with a lot of the pesticides. It's not dealing with a lot of the labeling. It's doing it, but my hope is to do something that we do, taking enough and balancing enough of all these issues that we can pass and have something to stand on. I think another argument people have said to me is, well, really, why are you rushing this? You know, let's just study this science and go on, and you know, let's not rush, this is a complex problem, and it's really the science, and let's really get down and understand the science, and then we can do something. But, you know, in my mind, this is a tipping point. I mean, today I learned, you know, Monsanto's setting up a new headquarters on this island. Yesterday I heard this parcel is being bought by so-and-so. So things are happening, and things are happening fast. Plus, if you look around, one of my big concerns is really the health of the reef and the health of the ocean. And just between 2009 and this year, there's been this, at least in Pelicani Bay or around in South Ookala area, a real devastation of the reef, and it wasn't in great shape before that. But again, what are all of the things that are contributing, and how do we, not just taking care of ourselves, our future generations, but how are we for whether it's the butterflies or the bees, or those little microorganisms that maybe they're what one of the testifiers talked about. I think that they contribute to magnesium in the soil, and that with the GMO you get less magnesium, and therefore you're more prone to diabetes. And there's all these little consequences that, again, that we don't understand. Or where you have, in Mississippi, there was just a report about, in Mississippi watershed, where the RoundUp, which is used with the GMOs, has so polluted the water and the air, and that is just almost unless where there's not a lot of wind. The whole air it just holds that chemistry so that you're getting it from all the soil. So again, I also want to just point to looking at, this is something that's going on around the world, and that I can't learn all the science, and I really encourage each of you to sort of take something, and you know, what happened in Paraguay, and what's happening someplace, or what is it, some aspect that you can each add. One thing like the nutrition, that's something that I keep wanting to read more. You know, if some of you can sort of take something that here's one thing I can offer, and that I have that expertise. Again, so that what we're doing is we're really educating. Ultimately, it's going to be educating that decides all of this. And we're not going to be, maybe there are choices, but we're moving forward. Win or lose on this, we'll do the best we can. I mean, that's my aim. I'm going to work this as best I can to get it through and have something to stand on, and something that really is drawing the line on we're not going to go farther. I just was over in Kauai, and it's just, you know, really all of this industry is so established on all of the other islands. And if you were to step back and say, okay, I don't really, you know, GMO or non-GMO, but what kind of, look at it as a portfolio. You know, here we have 3 that are this way. Why don't we take advantage of the economic opportunities that for, like one of the papaya growers that I met with, he grows GMO papayas, and he grows non-GMO papayas. He sells the non-GMO papayas to Europe and gets a premium. I met with someone who's representing a group of Japanese investors who they're looking at would this island be a reliable source of non-GMO and non-contaminated beef that they sell, say once it's cured or aged, is selling for more than the price of Kobe beef over there. And that people in Japan say, you know, we heard all this, everything's safe before Fukushima. We don't want to take a risk. You know, we want to do what we can. So I think there is an opportunity there. I think also that some of these companies need to learn how to be a little bit more aloha neighbors. You want your neighbor that's drifted, his seeds have drifted over to your garden, that he's suing you. Or my experience was knowing in Maine, the a very strong dairy lobby and force, and Oakers Dairy put on their milk cartons, everything they distributed, that it didn't contain BT or the hormone. And basically they brought in a whole herd of attorneys and brought lawsuits and ended up eliminating, taking over a large number of all the farms. And finally, Oakers just bent over and said, okay, we're going to settle and we'll take this out. But here it is, the non-GMO, they're just labeling, saying we don't have this, and the farms are just trying to say this is what is in ours, and this monopoly power is able to say no, this is the way life is going to be. So I think, again, it comes down to making a choice and supporting local farming, diversified agriculture, and getting people in touch with the soil and getting into that. We have a certain identity that we want on this island, a sense of place, and that this is what we're going to stand for. So I encourage you all to come to on July 2nd. The bill will be heard. I have some copies of the last edition. It's always a work in progress. If anyone wants to have a copy. I am trying to clarify some of the issues that have been uncertain. And, you know, for example, with livestock, it was unclear sort of how that would work if only those who were using GMO feeds could continue to do that or buy GMO feeds. I've eliminated that. But if you go down, you can see what's on here. I'm really trying to learn from everybody on all sides and how to do it. And I ask you, you know, not just contact your legislators, you know, but also, you know, the mayor and your state legislators. Again, we could go through all of this, and then if it's suddenly, you know, let's forget local, you know, how streamlined sometimes comes to be the code word for eliminate county input. You know? So, you know, how can work with everyone. And finally, I just want to say is that through this process, I think it's really important to sort of be aloha and be gracious and appreciate that a lot of people are trying to do what they think is best, and that sort of live what we're trying to say that we want for this island and do it as a model. And I appreciate you all. I can't do this all alone. I'm really only providing the vehicle for you all to take control of this island and have some input here and show that whether it's this issue or another, that the local people have incredible intelligence, Manao, and can play an important role in the well-being of this island. Thank you very much. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, and then if anyone else also has questions of others here, or even or anyone, I'll help to entertain them. Yeah.
Well, thank you for being courageous enough and just to take your time and energy to try to introduce this starting step, which is what it is. It's a starting step of resistance to this increasing evil around us. the question I have, which I don't really imagine anybody really has an answer to, if you're exempting large tracts of land, which of course you kind of do here out of necessity, when you exempt the medical and agricultural and research, agricultural research, I mean, this is what most of the land that is GMO right now, that's what most of it is. So.
Well, I'm tightening that up.
Right.
That wasn't the.
Okay, but I mean, see, you want this physical buffer zone, which, hallelujah. But beyond that, and I'm saying in advance, I don't see how this can be done, but beyond that, yeah, if you could stop it from spreading horizontally, that's good. But what about the contamination to the soil that lasts for years and years? And furthermore, what about the contamination to the water supply?
Right.
There is a big plateau that stretches all the way from Waimea around to Ookala that's being planted in GMO corn and drenched with chemicals, herbicides and pesticides. That is the watershed that goes down into the Waipio and the Seven Sacred Valleys. People live in Waipio, they drink that water, they're growing crops. All those pesticides and herbicides that are washing through the ground. I mean, what I'm saying is, no, I don't expect you to be able to put something in your bill about it, but just for all of us to think about that, what can be done on a long-range basis, step by step, like you're doing here, step by step, what can we do to prevent this saturation of the water supply that goes right through the waterfalls, through the Seven Sacred Valleys, right out to the reef you were talking about. That's a future issue. What can we do about
Well, maybe
that?
not. I mean, if we convince all of my comrades on this council, you know, what about, let's strengthen this. I felt that section on the medical and agricultural research institutions, I've changed that so it says that they all have to be located completely enclosed greenhouse or completely enclosed
Which is
structure.
really important because of the horizontal spread.
Right, and in all of these, whether it's papaya, that in terms of limiting any expansion. So it would still, so I can't today, this morning, we spent some time trying to figure out how the changes that I've made over the past couple of weeks, how we get those in, and since we've had so much testimony, we really haven't gotten to a point where I can then amend something that's this way, so it really won't come out. But let me just say, on that issue, I've tightened that up so that, if I'm a Monsanto ally, I don't suddenly call myself a research institute and just have enough money to buy up 750 feed and therefore do whatever I want. So I am going to modify that. It does, in terms of the papaya, allow where they are right now is pretty much, it allows them to stay there. If they're going to expand locations, then they would need to demonstrate that they cannot cross-pollinate, that they cannot cause harm. So again, I would be happy to strengthen this, but I want to get this through, and you each have a lot of different council members, and I know that there's a lot of pro-GMO people meeting with them, and I don't know who all's meeting with the mayor, but I know he's very busy. He hasn't had time to meet with me. So I think that it's really important, and letters to the editor. What can you each do? I mean, the West Hawaii Today, when we had that big hearing, there wasn't anything in the paper. There wasn't one word. And then the articles that came out the other day, that series, the first one that says Stevens Media, that was required to be in there word for word. They weren't allowed, except for the position on the papers, allowed to change anything. So there's a lot of power on the other side. So we're just playing chess here. Go ahead.
I'd like to make a comment in addition to what this lady has had to say. It isn't a question. It's just something that I have noticed, and I'm ashamed to say that I did not speak up. And she commented how we're all intelligent people and that we can stand up and we have a voice. This is what I've noticed on our many trips to Kona, going past these monstrous cornfields. There was an article by Stevens Media saying, obviously they interviewed some person, don't know who he is, but he owns thousands of these acres of this corn, and he said he's growing this corn for his cows. Does anyone here come from the Midwest and know what a cow eats? It does not eat corn. So how do we get ahead of this? They're lies. And I'm ashamed that I didn't call and try to speak my mind, which I know is the truth, and at least get some ears perked up to do something about this. But then again, Stevens Media likes to not publish some things and publish others. That's
Well, we have Bob here, and I think he'll put something in the paper. Read on up. Yes.
Well, the newspaper is owned by a man in Arkansas, billionaire. You folks can look it up. You can find out that Monsanto's already paid him off. That's why it is like it is with the Tribune. Boycotting the Tribune, that's probably what we can do with our dollar.
Yeah, cancel.
Okay, so we can start there. Another suggestion, and I don't know, what do you think of the idea of alerting a celebrity, now don't laugh, I know, who has a big place here, Oprah, about just showing her the bill, asking for her help in this.
We need all the help
Margaret, first I'd like to thank you for bringing this bill forward and bringing the issue so forward. And I also would like to address the issue of the Tribune Herald. I've sent them 2 letters that weren't too complimentary on GMOs. They refused to publish it. But what I'd like to ask you about is, I have one thing that troubles me a little bit about your bill, as I understand it. Let me see if I understand it correctly. The bill, I think, would allow GMOs to continue that are growing already here, like the papaya, but would ban new GMO crops from coming here. But the ones that are here, they would have to be like some kind of signage to say, like GMOs growing here on the, on this property or something like that. Is that correct?
Yeah, and let me say where they are growing, let's just say the papayas, they wouldn't be able to expand without showing that it's not going to impact another property. Okay, so there is a signage, I think I have it where at the entry points. There's also a registration, which I think is actually really important. I mean, when we look at those 700 acres that you speak of in Ookala, I mean, when I drove around Kauai, it's everywhere. I mean, it's just everywhere. The people that I met that were going surfing didn't want to surf at one of the best places because of the water coming down through those, the river going down in that area. So I think it's really important to do the registration so that we can really get a grasp of how extensive this is and where it is and what it is, so that everything in here, say like the horticultural, there's a horticultural exemption, provided that it's not for, that it's not for human consumption, but at least every single place would they have to register. And ultimately, this is going to be 2 hands. There's the law, and also there's getting people's awareness. which, you know, I think that they're gonna work together, you know, how we work, and it's, so I think that there'll be an impact there, but I'm not sure if I fully, if there was more to your
Well, what
question.
troubles me with it then is, well, I'm kind of, you know, I like nonviolence and aloha and deal with things in that way, but I know that there's a lot of anger about GMOs out there. I can imagine, you know, if a farmer goes post a sign, this is GMO papaya, so somebody gonna come in there and try to destroy his crop. And, you know, I don't like to see the issue dealt with that way.
Right, I agree, and I changed the way the signage is, so that it's at the entry point, so that if people are accessing the land, that they'll be aware that that's what's going on, but that they don't have to have signs all over along the highway, hi, I'm a GMO contaminator. Okay, oh, yeah, and I'd like to just pass this around, and anyone that would like to be kept up to date as to exactly what's happening is if you put your email address down. And
So we have 2 sheets. Since we only have 25 minutes, I'm going to start one at the bottom and one at the top, and hopefully they'll come around. This is not occupied. This is the Margaret Wille sign-up sheet. But if you want to sign up for occupied too, maybe just make a check and then Margaret. And I only have 1 pen. I'm sorry, but somebody can borrow somebody's pen.
Okay, let me just take a, right there, let me ask the man with the orange shirt, because I know his hand's been up for a while.
Product safety sheet. I mean, they're modifying these organisms. Should they be allowed, should we have some kind of safety sheet as to what the modification would be? Sure. I mean, sure, it would involve studies, probably long-term studies which haven't been done. And wouldn't that somehow force them to produce studies?
And what we're saying is, stay out of here. If you want to go do some studies, that's for you to do. It's not for us as a government or the people.
Study the existing products.
Yeah.
And have them come up with a safety sheet
Okay.
of that product, all the products that they produce.
And let me just say, the only thing in terms of this bill is it would have people register what it is they're modifying and what they're doing, what the GMO, so that we'll have some knowledge of what is in it. But there's still a lot more. I mean, Gary Hooser is introducing a bill over in Kauai, and it's, you know, they're basically just trying to say halt on the experimental seed and do a moratorium for a couple of years so they can look at it. And my only thing there is that the burden shouldn't be on the government to then figure it out. That's not the way the precautionary principle works, but they're in a different situation. It's really the whole island, there's so much of it. And he's doing a lot more on pesticides, which I don't do, which is something that is another separate issue, or it's interrelated, but it's something more. So doesn't do everything. This is just trying to do, let's take a step and get this through and get the council members on board here and show that we can have some say-so and show that this is important. And it will be heard. You know, we can talk to Tom right back there and say, Tom, if this meeting isn't covered, you're going to be in big trouble. Anyway. Yes, go right back there. The woman in the back row, yeah.
I'm a bit curious about the horticultural exemption, what the thinking is on that. Do we not have the same, or maybe we don't even know, but don't we have the same dangers, except for the fact that humans are not consuming those flowers or those horticultural products? What about the damage to the Aina? And what is the thinking about exempting a whole industry like that? What about the wild animals that come in and eat those products, and then we go out and hunt them and consume them? What is the reasoning?
Well, I totally agree with you, and I'd love for you to propose an amendment on that and get that through. I mean, what I am doing in terms of horticultural, which wasn't there, is to add in the registration and signage, that we at least find out where it's going on and what's doing. And that could be a future step. I just, but again, you know, I am very open to friendly amendments, and it's just, let's see what we can do. I mean, my sense is that there's a real tsunami here pushing against us, and we gotta, if we're gonna tackle all of those that have that vested economic interest, I don't think that I can get it all through right now, so. Yes, but maybe I can, maybe we can.
I'd like to recommend, the county has a registration area of all land on this island, correct? You can trace every piece of land on this island.
Yeah, TMKs.
Through ownership.
Yeah.
Okay. Why don't the county create a law saying all GMO planted on any land on this island will be registered? The county will now know, and the people will now be able to know where all GMOs are planted on this island.
Right. And
At least it's a controlled method.
Right.
You don't have any control right now.
There's, right.
And even the law that you're trying to create, if you say that there has got to be a barrier in between GMO and non-GMO, how are you going to control the cross-pollination, either by the wind, the birds, bees? That's going to happen eventually anyway.
Right.
How are you going to control barriers?
No,
That's a big lie
Right.
that came out by Monsanto,
Right.
not the county council. But they say you can create barriers by making spaces in between. That's a big lie.
In
There's no
fact,
such
taking out that footage deal.
But you have control of the land. You can make people register all the GMO crops that's grown. Why don't you approach it from
Okay.
that side of the fence?
I do have that in here. I have
And
that
I
in
think
here,
that would
and we
probably
need to
be
support
really
it.
more
But
accurate.
we also have to have it where people are in realtors, when the land is sold, that should be disclosed.
Right,
I
because
mean-
the agriculture will not do anything about it. Department of Agriculture won't do anything. The Department of Health won't do anything about it. So consequently, all you can do is control it through the land.
Right. And
That's
that's
where I'm
why
coming from.
we have to be the spokespersons for the soil, for those little microorganisms that are also in us, for those butterflies, for that. And again, I really appreciate and would like to even strengthen what I do have here and encourage you to encourage your legislators to propose that and not just go along with what I have. You know, Margaret, you know, this is just 101, you know, we need a 301 bill here, you know. But like I said, if we lose this, if this is killed, it's at least 2 years before we can bring something up. I mean, it's another legislative session. And if you look at the other islands, you see how fast things happen. So again, let's get this as best possible and work it and try to get it passed. I'll take with the man with the white shirt first.
Sometimes seems like our representative government doesn't really represent us, and it's very difficult to be heard or, in fact, influence it. You being on the inside looking out, for instance, my representative didn't bother to come to the meetings that you were at. I was scheduled to go to a meeting with him, which he then rescheduled. How can we better influence you guys? and you give us some advice as a group as to how we can utilize our time between now and the 2nd to actually make more of a difference than coming to a meeting like this.
Right. I would say that everyone here gets at least 10 people to come. And it doesn't mean everybody has to testify. You can come and have 20, 50 people there, have their names, read them. Here is what we're all testifying for. So-and-so from Ocean View, so-and-so from Hilo, so-and-so from here. And read that, and there may be people on the council that still it won't work, but we need a certain number of votes. And it's getting those votes, and also trying to keep it so it's veto-proof in case our pal Billy decides he doesn't like it. So we also have to keep, it's not just speaking to him, it's, contacting his office and influencing him, and also, and it's bringing up, like, this isn't just short-term economics. We need to look at the long-term, and long-term economic well-being and environmental well-being and social well-being all come together. So, yes, way in the back there.
Yes, I just want to say thanks for the work you're doing. I know it's really very difficult to balance out, all the different constituents' wants and needs. I just wanted to point out the aspect of the pollen drift. I do horticultural research and breeding, and so I'm growing papayas, and if someone comes along and they eat a papaya from the market here, which has a GMO seed in it, it can pop up in my garden. And now, if that's spreading around in my garden, they're taking away my freedom to have the right to not eat that stuff.
Right. So I hope you're going to come testify.
I will. I'll be there. And I wrote a letter to the editor. I've been trying to schedule an editorial board meeting with the Tribune Herald. No response. But the point about the research exemptions, like any of these exemptions, I feel like what it does is kind of like it could be a backdoor for Monsanto or whoever. And my understanding is the rainbow papaya was not released. It was stolen and spread around. It was not released officially. And so whatever crazy research they want to do, it's just, I think we've got to put our foot down and have a very strong stance. And like you're saying, you need the people behind you. So I really want to encourage people to come out, like you said, bring 10 people.
Right.
Now
So
is the chance for us to do this.
I do have, in other words, if you read the bill as it is now, I have strengthened it so that it's clear that if you are doing anything licensed, state or federal licensed, medical or agricultural facilities, that those have to be completely enclosed in a greenhouse or other completely enclosed structure. So I spoke to someone the other day that told me about how they had been in Puna and growing non-GMO papayas, and then when all the GMO came in, they got totally contaminated and sold out. So it's when it's all of this success story. What was it, 80? We're now up to 3/8 of the amount of papayas. When you say a success story, we're nowhere near what the production was when it was good. And my concern is always, well, how much research is the university doing in natural ways or looking at the old Hawaiian ways? One of the things that happened in South America, Monsanto coming in, was eliminating all of those things that they learned about that these weeds are actually good and keep out this. And all of that kind of knowledge, and how much they spent 12 years studying how to do this with GMOs for papaya. How much time are they spending on doing it other ways? Monsanto is one of the biggest donors to the University of Hawaii. So you give to, all the good guys, the good nonprofits, and it's sort of like, where do you expect? You look at Star Advertising, somebody was saying, take a look at their board, their editorial board. 4 of them are basically Monsanto people. So, you come in and you have a lot of power, and we're just going to stand up to them and not let this happen. That's all. Way in the back. That's a possibility. again, everything takes time. We'll figure something out.
It's not gonna happen so fast.
But anyway, so we gotta work on this one. The PLDC, we went over there, and it was just, okay, if we just show that we can have an impact, then we get listened to again. So each time, it's not just about this, it's about that you will have some say-so. And not just the few little people that can go in and chit-chat to Abercrombie and Billy and control what goes on.
So does your bill propose how to enforce this registration?
Well, this is a question, and I met with one of the departments, because none of the departments in the county wants to be in charge. So how does one, first I started with Department of Environmental Management, protecting the environment, and then research and development was the department I met with today, and which is, we don't have an agricultural department. I actually tried to get a charter bill in to set one up, and it was, well, then we're spending money on administration, let's do it here. Should it be Department of that, or should it be planning department, or should it be the police? I mean, trying to just figure out how this works. So that is, there's some of the things that have questions and how we set up. I am going to have registration fees, so in theory, other than at the beginning, we should be able to fund inspectors. And there is a company that you can send things to really quickly, and it's really inexpensive. I think for the whole tree, they'll test it's like $3 or less. So you can get, is there GMOs? Now you can get down what is the fine amount. In Europe, they have a certain standard. You can't get into the really, really low numbers, but we can figure that out. So that is a question. I know they need to stop, but I just want to get through these last questions. Yeah.
Just a quick comment. Encourage people at each of the testimony site. It's going to be a long day on July the 2nd. Perhaps it would be a great day for someone at the site to organize a non-GMO potluck.
Yes.
And especially if they're on the pesticide, maybe a great way to.
Yeah, so I want to repeat that. It will be a long day. We can come together. If you've got 10 people, the council really appreciates that. You're 10 people, so. But it will be long. I know they're bringing in some people, Filipinos, that need a translator, and that's going to take time, and on and on. But I think if we do the non-GMO, but invite all the GMO people. I just want us to be the kind of aloha to the land and to the people, and help to bridge those relationships and do that. Over here, yes. Yeah.
Well, I had a couple of things. One was, I get really frustrated. I've been following agriculture for a long time, and when I meet somebody who's really up to date on what's happening, there's a whole avalanche of things to transmit to them. And so I thought one thing, I agree with you, the education is where it's at. And we've got this island, and it's got a nice border, and I'm like, why don't we get everybody, have a campaign to get everybody on the Big Island to watch Fooding and Genetically by the end of the year. Just blast it, because those movies really put it across. My 5-year-old loves Fooding, it's like anybody can watch it. So I just want to say, if we can do something, maybe that. And I have another question, which is, I've been watching, that's not good. I've been following the Supreme Court cases that deal with this. And the last one, they focused on patent law, and they took such a weak stance. I'm like, we're going to lose because we keep taking such a weak stance and facing all this. And when I track it back, I go, you know what? You shouldn't be able to patent and own life. It goes back there. Like all of this other stuff, it's all kind of truth, but the core truth is back there for me, and it's being run over. It's like, I think Hector brought up trespassing. It's bigger than trespassing. Right. And if you go to the courts based on trespassing, it's just too weak. Can we in this Constitution, the folks the Supreme Court that stood behind that, well, they didn't even take himself off the ruling, you know?
I know.
So maybe this Supreme Court in this state could say, you know what, it's just, we don't think it's a crime against humanity to even own the things.
That's right.
So, you know, that's where I want to go with it.
No, I appreciate, and I think that your suggestion of how can education and how to be people, because I think when I first started on this, I started looking at what had done in California, and this county had done it, and this, and just started working on it. And the more, and I look at, okay, everyone that I knew growing up, except for some kids that lived on a orchard with a lot of pesticides, no one had allergies, except for those kids I knew at this orchard. Now I look at my kids are ill, they've got no family, you know, they've got this, that, and everyone, and where is this coming from? Well, we don't know, but why don't we do the things that we can to correct it? And I think in answer to your question and looking at the Supreme Court, you know, we just got to start someplace. And so that's why I say start on this island. This is the island that your votes control and that we control. So there are some legislators that, regardless how many people go see them, may not make any difference. But there's enough on this council that it will make a difference. So anyway, thank you. One last question there.
Yeah, I was just wondering with these exemptions that you've put into your bill since the original bill, have you gotten any feedback from the people who you're trying to accommodate? Because I get the feeling that you're accommodating people who don't want to be accommodated. They just want to see the thing go away. And, you know.
And that's a good point. I mean, I think that those people that have come and talked to me, and actually we've had an adult conversation, how can we do this? You know, I've tried to listen and do it. But it's also, part of it is that we're being reasonable, that as you're looking at people that represent those interests, and many of them that have that power, have the best access to people, but to look and say, here, we're doing this. Yes, somehow papaya got in, we didn't get control of it. This is a horticulture. So I think it's that we're trying to do what we think is the most Pono right now. It's not the greatest, and maybe you all can get the amendments in so we and change some of that. But I think that if we just do where we're not taking on those vested interests, but we're still making them register, like this man said, we're still making them accountable for what they're doing. And that may not seem like a big thing, but I actually think of that as a really important step. Cynthia?
This is actually for Kay. The petition that you said started with 300 signatures and now is up to 12,000?
Or 1,200. 1,200. We're hoping for 12,000.
We're going
for it, though.
We're going for 12. Tomorrow. Can we get copies of that to take to our, more local communities and try to give to friends and get more signatures and send those back to you somehow?
Jason Blair, right back there. Go ahead and raise your hand. He is the petition starter guy. And do you want to just say a brief thing about that? Just.
I don't know if that necessarily needs to come down, but yeah, if whoever wants to contact me, or whoever wants to take initiative there, I can use your information and print off some copies. Sure.
Okay, and
real
quickly.
quick, if everybody in this room tomorrow got on Hawaii News Now and said you attended her meeting and weren't fed up with GMO, tell them what you believe in, call Howard Dykes, he listens, maybe we'll be on the news tomorrow.
Okay, because we can do this. We can do this island. This is just one thing.
With the petition, everyone that signs it is going to enter that online, and every person that, all of the council members get an email each time everyone signs. So they're getting 1,200.
Now they are doing their own petition. I don't know what they're up to. Move on.
Okay, so Jason?
Yes.
Jason's petition is on change.org. The easiest, best thing you could possibly do is actually go home and Google it yourself and sign it yourself. on the computer because
So what do
it
you
tabulates
Google?
automatically.
What do you have to Google?
So go to change.org and look for, is it called Bill 79? It has the words County Council Bill 79 in it. If you Google Bill 79 and GMO, you'll probably find it. If you cannot find it, you can look on the GMO-free Hawaii Island Facebook page. It's in the event page for this thing on Facebook, and there's GMO-free-HawaiiIsland.org is the website. And we'll make Blake fix that so it's on there too, quick before you get home.
Right, but look up, write letters to the council and research. If you go on the internet, it's amazing how much information, if you just take one thing that you grab a hold and sort of take charge of, it'll be really helpful.
But if you did sign the petition, if you did sign the petition here, don't go online and sign it because I'm gonna enter it, so we don't want duplicates, just do one or the other.
Okay, and if you could sign that email list before you go, that would be great. And I really like the potluck idea, bringing things and sharing. I mean, this is, you're sitting and listening, but what are we gonna do next? Don't waste your time, use it. And now we're a lot more things to.
Hey, just a quick bounce off what the fella ahead of me said. Somebody go buy a papaya here. They don't know, they don't care if it's GMO or not. They eat it, they throw the seeds in their yard, few of them grow. I'm pretty sure that we got the GMOs in all our neighborhoods, the GMO papayas already. So the genie's out of the bottle. We can't,
Well,
we
that's
can't
what
register
one
them
of
all.
somebody from the university said to me, oh, Margaret, we've sort of polluted it all, everybody. They didn't use that word, but, you should just surrender and give up and just have organic and everything else you just should assume. And I said, no, that's not what we're going to do. So I think we still have a chance on this island. It's not there for the other islands, but we can do it and be that model and be that vision. What Eden says, think about it, picture what we want, how we have an opportunity here in many ways. Thank you.
One more announcement here. There is a donation jar at the back, so if you would like to donate, just go ahead and donate to the little clear jar next to Dave as you're going out to help pay for some of the materials and things. But Carrie right here is going to, if you have not had the experience of submitting testimony, she's going to kind of do a little brief walkthrough of the steps. And then Jeff back there is just going to give us a brief 2-minute about the GMO-free zone and how you can be involved and active doing that. Alrighty.
All right. If you haven't signed the petition, but you want to, sure. Go back
Okay, I recognize a lot of people here as totally pro-testifier givers, so I'm going to be really, really brief. But the deal is, the agenda for this Bill 79 July 2nd meeting will probably be out Wednesday, if we're very lucky tomorrow, and then we're going to put out the mass call for testifiers. You can either send in written testimony with no limit, as far as I know. Send them the encyclopedia if you like, but try and edit just a little bit. You can also do a video testimony. You can record yourself a 3-minute video and email the link to it. Put it on YouTube or Vimeo or whatever you can and send in that. And then the third and most important way to testify is to show up in person. Now the council will meet in Kona. Okay, that means all 9 of them will be in Kona. And but you can testify at any of the 5 satellite sites. So you can go to Kona, Hilo, Pahoa, Waimea, or Ocean View Estates. And in fact, we're encouraging people to please go to the satellite sites. For one thing, it's going to be jam-packed in both Hilo and Kona. There's going to be a line out the door all day long. So if it's closer for you to go to Pahoa anyway, please do that. And please grab 5 people and bring them in with you. Now, when you get into any of these 5 places, you want to sign up to testify. They will have these little half sheets, which I know nobody can see, but this is it. Like, there's a table right when you walk in the door, and you fill this out, please check support. Even if you have issues with the bill or you have ideas, that's okay. In fact, that's encouraged. But it's very important that you do not oppose this bill. Support it and then suggest amendments or fixes or new language or whatever you want to say. But this is a number count, folks, and they will absolutely, in the summary minutes that they put out for this committee meeting, they will add up how many for and how many against and how many commented. That's another one. So please check support and then say whatever you want to say, you know, but it's absolutely imperative. Also,
Get there early.
And
They had
show up
40
early.
people, they filled every seat in Hilo.
Yes, they did. Okay, so when you're filling this up, also, if you represent a group in any way, please write that down. A lot of, especially the satellite sites will say that when they introduce you. They'll say, this is Jim Albertini from Maluaina. If you are a farmer, say that. If you're a mom, say that. Whatever you are, say it. And that makes it personal, and that makes you memorable, and that's a good idea. So don't think that I'm nobody, and everybody in here eats food. And then everybody else has some other reason that they like this, and that's why they're here. Okay, so please remember to put your name, put your group or your business or whatever you have on this and sign up. Now, what they're going to do is start, there's 5 spots, remember, they're going to take 2 from each spot. So they're going to sit you down, they're going to call up Jim and Josephine, and they're going to sit there and they're going to go 2 by 2 by 2 around the site. So you may sit there for a half an hour before they call on you. Use that time to not freak out. Gather your thoughts. Don't, don't get all, tied up about it. A lot of people do that because they don't realize it's going to be so long. Also, do not feel like you have to fill the whole 3 minutes. Again, this is a numbers game, and we want to jam as many butts through those testimony seats as we can. So if you just want to get up there, sit down and say, hi, I'm a mom and I support Bill 79 and take off, bonus, okay? And by all means, think about what you're going to say before you sit down. Prepare your testimony, do some research, have some bullet points, and know what you're going to say before you sit down. And also, like Miss Margaret said, show up early and stay all day. You will show up, you'll fill out this thing, and then they're going to write you down on a list. And it's first come, first served. So if you're number 12 on the list, you're going to get to go soon. If you're number 56, it's probably going to be the afternoon. Please come back after lunch. That's the other problem, is a lot of times we have bad attrition over lunch. Please come back in the afternoon. Even if you already testified in the morning, if you've got the day, please come fill the chambers in all 5 sites.
You can give your phone number to the person there at the office to say, I'm just talking about the name, the outlying ones, and they'll, like in Waimea, they'll give you a call, you need to come back, or.
Oh, in Waimea, they'll call you and let you know.
No, I didn't expect Pahoa they would call, but.
I don't know,
But
I know.
just want to
But you
say.
can check. If you
the
know you're
most-
number 56 on the list, you can go up to the clerk and ask her where they're at, and you can kind of get an idea.
But the most important thing is, remember, is that early, that they had almost every seat filled with pro-GMO. Yeah, they did. The people that were, Annie, had to stand out and stand outside because they were all there. Well, they had their lines lined up like 45 minutes ahead of time and just.
Yeah, if you're not a resident, you can still testify. Anybody can testify. You do not have to be a registered voter. But please show up. Please sign up. And wear green. Please wear green. Okay, and also I want to point out Shondell up there at the top. Wave, Shondell, wave up there. She has some handy-dandy sheets up there. If you've never prepared testimony before, she's got some worksheets. She's got the maps, all of the council members' names and addresses and phone numbers, all that good stuff. So go see Shondell. And then I'm going to introduce Jeff Raw, who's going to tell you about our GMO-free zone and some of the other things that Hawaii Island, GMO-free Hawaii Island is doing.
Hey guys, thank you for staying. Probably seen a few of these around. They've been around for a long time. Lynn and I have one outside of our farm for about 8 years. Believe me, one of these will be noticed in the neighborhood. 3 or 4 of these will change the neighborhood. So anyway, we offer these for free. We just ask you that you post them publicly. It is a visual statement. It works 24 hours a day, all the time. Margaret goes out and she's feeling bad and all that. She sees these all over the island. She knows she's got support. You know, this is a big commitment. I've been handing these out for about 8 years now, and a lot of people take them with the greatest, thoughts about putting them out publicly.
May I have that sign? Over there.
Yes, yes, we got plenty of signs for everybody. You have to leave, right over there. So I'm just saying, a lot of them end up on refrigerators, so, it's like, just know that this thing is here, this little GMO tsunami is just roaring in here. And I've done this work long enough to know that it's only going to be changed from the grassroots. So I ask all of you, who might be a little reluctant to put up something like this, now's the time. It's just so meaningful, and it's just one of the few things that's always there. People can see it, people will talk, the neighbors will talk to you. It'll make a huge difference. We have a whole pile of them up there. We'd be more than happy to give you one if you'd like to distribute them, or if you know a neighbor or something. We'd be glad to give them to you. The other thing is, you're welcome to take a picture of your family, your friends, your dog, whatever, with this sign. Send it to us with a little statement about GMOs. We'll give you your own webpage. Put it in the books, and so Margaret and the other council members can go and just see you, your friends, and your neighbors, and this great stack of people saying GMO, at least as it is right now, is Monsanto style is totally unacceptable. Thanks a bunch.
Mahalo, Deb, and mahalo everyone for coming. We have a surprise speech by Uncle John, and I think it's good that we listen to our kupuna, yeah? So he has prepared something for this evening.
My name is John Ookala, born and raised on this island, a retired citizen today. I'm a combat veteran from Korea and Vietnam. I was exposed to Agent Orange and suffered the consequences from that experience as other veterans do. Monsanto and 3M produced Agent Orange, tested the chemical on this island before use in Vietnam. 20 years later, after the war ended, in Agent Orange is still very active. Cancer is rampant in Vietnam. It was verified by American scientists, including representatives from Monsanto, and spreading cancer among the whole population. RoundUp, created by Monsanto, is a watered-down version of Agent Orange. This weed killer is marketed worldwide. Monsanto creates GMO seeds that are resistant to Roundup, as verified by the wheat crop in Oregon. The person that spoke earlier about Oregon, this wheat crop that was grown on a farmer's lot, they tried to kill it with Roundup. It didn't do anything to the wheat. It didn't kill it, it didn't make it brown, nothing. Compare what I've just said to human beings. Experience with inoculation shots to prevent contagious disease. The shot contains a small amount of disease injected into the body, which requires the body immune system to attack the disease. So if Monsanto seeds are resistant to Roundup, as advertised, is it not a reality to think that the seeds are injected with Roundup to change the DNA of the seed? Therefore, the product grown contains Roundup and is ingested by human beings. The remaining question is, how long will it be before damage to the human body starts to become apparent? What is the real reason for the strong resistance to label GMO products? Could it be that the creator of GMO seed is not willing to share the idea that the company is slowly but very effectively reducing the population of the earth, at the same time advertising that the company is attempting to create seeds to feed the hungry people of the world? Connecticut law requiring GMO labeling will become effective if other states create similar laws. GMO seeds are planted worldwide. Due to the Roundup resistant seed, more Roundup is used to control the weeds. In a few cases, small traces of chemicals used in napalm bombs was detected by scientists in the grown GMO produce. This same chemical is used up in the Roundup also. This island is used as a testing ground for many experiments that is not revealed to the public. The isolated island, good soil and weather, makes it an ideal location for accelerated growth of products. This attracts many influential companies to conduct experimental growth of products for large-scale production elsewhere. Many varieties of crops have been grown. Crops have been or in the process of adjusting experimental GMO seeds. The island papaya growers praise GMO for saving papaya industry from the ringworm virus. The GMO papaya does not have the same aroma or flavor as non-GMO papaya. The researcher or company who funded GMO papaya seed is reluctant to allow labeling of this papaya. Why? Is the nutrition value so different between the non-GMO and GMO product? Is all GMO product harmful for human consumption? China contracted Monsanto worth billions for huge purchase of GMO soybeans grown in Brazil. It was in the thousands of tons. Many Asian countries will not import GMO products. All the false statements made by the federal government agencies, Monsanto, and the researchers are all coming into full view. Whether the public is aware of it or not is not known. There are continuous articles on the internet, including the states that have filed a lawsuit against Monsanto. Experimental GMO crops were experimentally grown in 16 states across the U.S. without the knowledge or approval of the government or its citizens. Thank you.
Hello everyone, we're all pals, so enjoy your evening and come look at the stuff up front and in back and if you're interested.